You know what hurts the most? It's not death. It's watching your own children fight over your money. While you're still breathing, they sat in my living room screaming about my $10 million, and not one of them even looked at the person who actually owned it. But when the truth came out, the room went completely silent. I never thought I'd see the day my own kids would treat me like a walking wallet. After my husband Henry passed away, the family fell apart piece by piece. People think money brings comfort. But in my family, it brought out the worst sides of everyone. Today I'll tell you how my children tried to take everything I had, and how the quietest person in the room, someone they never saw as important, ended up with it all. It all started the week after Henry's funeral. The house was full of flowers, the smell of lilies everywhere. But instead of mourning, my children were whispering in corners. My eldest son, Mark, was already asking about the estate. My daughter, Susan, kept saying, "Mom, you're too old to manage that kind of money now. We'll take care of it. Take care of it." That's what they said when they wanted to sell my jewelry, my home, my memories. I wasn't a fool. Henry and I had worked hard our entire lives, running a small construction business that grew into something far bigger than we ever dreamed. We weren't rich when we started, but by the time he passed, our assets were worth over $10 million. That money was supposed to be a safety net for our family, for the grandkids, for education, for emergencies, not for greed. But greed doesn't wait for logic. It moves fast, like a shadow that takes over everything. And within weeks, my family had turned my living room into a battlefield. The fight started small. Mark wanted to invest the money in his business. Susan said she needed funds to renovate her house. Even my youngest, Daniel, the quiet one who rarely asked for anything, started getting calls from them, trying to make him take sides. I sat in silence most of the time, watching, listening. They forgot I was there. They talked about me like I wasn't alive. One night, Susan said, "Mom's not in her right mind these days. We should just take her signature and sort the accounts." And Mark agreed. That night, I cried for the first time since Henry's funeral, not because of money, but because of how easy it was for my own blood to forget I was human. But not everyone in that house had lost their heart. My granddaughter, Emily, who was only 19, had stayed with me during those hard weeks. She cooked for me, helped me walk when my knees hurt, and never once asked about the money. Instead, she asked about Grandpa, about our old days, about love. I started noticing something. She would often record small stories I told her, saying, "Grandma, one day I'll write them down." She reminded me so much of my younger self, gentle but strong in her own way. As the days passed, the pressure grew. Mark called a family meeting, said we needed to finalize the estate distribution. He brought documents, big legal words I couldn't even read without my glasses. He said it was just paperwork. Formalities, he called them. But I'd been married to Henry for 50 years. We'd signed hundreds of documents together, and I knew exactly what a transfer of ownership form looked like. They weren't finalizing my estate. They were trying to take it while I was still alive. So I played along, told them I'd meet them at the lawyer's office the next week to discuss everything. What they didn't know was that Henry and I had already set up something special before he died. A clause in the will, a secret only our lawyer and I knew. The day of the meeting arrived. Mark came in wearing his best suit, Susan brought her husband, and Daniel sat at the back, looking uncomfortable. Emily came too. She insisted, even though her mother told her to stay home. The lawyer, Mr. Peterson, started reading Henry's will. Everything was going as expected. Small properties, old assets, sentimental things. And then came the big part, the $10 million inheritance. The room went cold. Mark leaned forward. Susan crossed her arms. Mr. Peterson paused, looked at me, then continued. According to Mr. Henry's wishes, the $10 million fund will not be transferred directly to any child. A loud gasp came from Susan. "What do you mean? Who else is there?" she snapped. The lawyer cleared his throat and said, Mr. Henry and Mrs. Margaret Wilson had decided that the rightful owner of this inheritance will be the person who showed true care and love, not greed. The room went quiet. Then laughter. Mark laughed the loudest. "What's this, some moral test? Dad was sentimental, but come on, Mom. Who even qualifies for that?" Mr. Peterson smiled slightly. He opened a second envelope. Inside was a simple handwritten note from Henry. "To my dear wife, Margaret. If you're reading this, it means I've gone ahead. I trust you'll do what's right. Give this inheritance to the one who reminded you of us. Not through blood, but through love." Tears filled my eyes. Everyone was staring at me now, waiting for me to speak. But I didn't. I just turned to Emily. She was sitting quietly beside me, holding my hand. That was when Susan exploded. "Oh, come on! She's just a kid. You can't give her everything." Mark stood up. "Mom, don't do this. You're emotional. We deserve this more than she does." I looked around that room. My children, the same ones I'd held as babies, now filled with anger and greed. And then I looked at Emily, the only one who had sat with me through nights of pain and silence. Mr. Peterson looked at me one last time. "Mrs. Wilson, as per Mr. Henry's request, you alone have the right to name the recipient." I took a deep breath. "I already have," I said. The lawyer smiled. "Then, as stated, the $10 million inheritance shall be transferred to Ms. Emily Wilson." You could hear a pin drop. Mark slammed his hand on the table. "You're kidding me. A teenager? You're handing her everything?" Susan started shouting. Daniel stood up trying to calm them, but no one listened. Emily just sat there, tears in her eyes, whispering, "Grandma, I don't want the money. I just want you." "And that broke me completely," I said. "That's exactly why you deserve it." The lawyer finalized the documents, and while my family stormed out yelling about betrayal, Emily just hugged me. That hug meant more than $10 million ever could. Months passed after that day. Mark stopped calling. Susan moved away. Daniel still visits sometimes. He said he never wanted the money anyway. But life has been peaceful. Emily used part of the inheritance to start a foundation in Henry's name, to help elderly people who are neglected by their families. She didn't buy cars or houses. She bought hope. Sometimes she sits beside me on the porch, and we watch the sunset like I used to with Henry. And every time she holds my hand, I hear Henry's voice in my heart saying, "You chose right. People think money changes you, but it doesn't. It only shows who you really are." If you want more stories like this, just hit subscribe. I've got plenty more from Grandma's diary. I thought giving Emily the money would bring peace, but instead, it brought back the very people I tried to protect her from. When they walked back into my house months later, smiling like nothing had happened, I knew something was wrong, and I was right, because this time, they weren't after me. They were after her. It's strange how quiet a house feels when love leaves it. After the will reading, the silence was almost peaceful. No yelling, no fake smiles, no lies. But peace doesn't last long when greed still breathes in your bloodline. I learned that the hard way when my family, the same people who screamed at me that day, started knocking again, pretending they wanted to make things right. Only this time, it wasn't me they wanted to win over. It was Emily. After inheriting the $10 million, Emily became cautious. She didn't post anything online, didn't brag, didn't even change her phone. She was humble, just like her grandfather had been. She used some of the money to set up a small foundation, helping elderly people who had no one. She named it Henry's Heart. I was proud beyond words, but the more she gave, the more attention she got. Her mother, my daughter Susan, saw a picture of Emily in a newspaper article, smiling beside a group of seniors her foundation helped. And just like that, the call started again. At first, Susan called me, pretending to care. "Mom," she said sweetly, "I was wrong. Maybe I judged too fast. We all did. Can we just be a family again?" Her voice shook, but not with guilt, with greed. I knew that tone. I'd heard it my whole life. I told her, "If you want to fix things, start with an apology to your daughter." But she didn't. Instead, she started visiting Emily, pretending to be proud of her. She brought gifts, made dinners, smiled too much. I saw right through it. One afternoon, Emily came to me nervous. "Grandma," she said quietly, "Mom's been acting strange. She keeps asking me about my bank accounts, how I'm managing things." I sighed. I'd been expecting this. I told her, "Sweetheart, some people don't want your love. They want what your love brought you." She didn't want to believe it. She still wanted to see the best in everyone. But soon, even she couldn't ignore it. Within weeks, Mark and Daniel started showing up too. Mark claimed he wanted to help manage the foundation. Daniel, who had stayed quiet before, seemed nervous, as if someone had pushed him to join. They'd sit at the dinner table pretending to reminisce about old times, then casually bring up money. Mark would say, "You're so young, Emily. Handling all that cash must be tough." Susan would add, "Maybe we could help guide you. You know, family helping family." But I wasn't fooled. Neither was Emily, though she stayed polite. Too polite. It got worse when Susan brought a lawyer friend to dinner one night, pretending it was a family legal advisor. He kept asking questions about the foundation, about trust accounts, about how Emily had invested. It felt less like dinner and more like an interrogation. That night, I told Emily to stay cautious, but she didn't want to turn them away. She said, "Grandma, I want to believe they've changed." And I said, "Then make them prove it." So she gave them a chance. One last chance. Weeks passed. At first, it seemed like maybe Susan was trying. She stopped asking about money directly. She started helping Emily with events, arranging volunteers, showing up early. Mark even donated a small amount to the foundation. But with cameras around, of course. Then one morning, Emily woke up to a strange email from her bank. It said someone had tried to access her account from another city. At first, she thought it was a glitch, until she noticed something missing, $50,000. Gone. She panicked and came straight to me. We sat at the kitchen table, her hands trembling, tears forming in her eyes. "Grandma," she whispered, "I trusted them. I gave Mom access to the charity funds so she could help pay for supplies. What if—" I stopped her. I already knew. We went straight to the bank, and there it was. The withdrawal, done using Susan's signature. But she had added Emily's name under it, forged but clean enough to fool most people. The bank said the money was transferred to a business account under a company I'd never heard of. But the director's name? Mark Wilson. My heart broke. Not because of the money, but because even after everything, they hadn't changed at all. Emily wanted to press charges immediately, but I stopped her. "No," I said. "We'll handle this the way your grandfather would have, with truth and patience." So, we called a family meeting. Again. Just like before. But this time, it was at my house, not the lawyer's office. When they arrived, everyone acted normal, pretending to care. Susan brought flowers. Mark wore that same fake grin. Daniel avoided eye contact completely. We sat in the living room, the same one where the first fight happened months ago. Only this time, Emily spoke first. She looked straight at her mother and said, "Mom, did you take $50,000 from the foundation?" The smile dropped from Susan's face. "What? Of course not." Then Emily pulled out the bank statement and placed it on the table. The room went silent. Mark tried to speak, but she cut him off. "And your company received the transfer." "Why?" he stuttered. It was a mistake, Em. We were just moving it temporarily." She shook her head. I trusted you. Grandpa trusted you. You proved him wrong again. Then I spoke up. You thought I was too old to notice, didn't you? You forgot that Henry and I built our fortune from nothing. We've seen every trick in the book. Susan tried to apologize, tears rolling down her face. But not real ones. She said, Mom, we were just desperate. You have no idea how hard life has been. And I replied, hard. Hard is losing your husband and still having to fight your own children to keep his memory pure. Emily stood up and said something I'll never forget. You didn't just steal money. You stole trust. And I don't think I can ever get that back. Then she walked out, and for the first time ever, she didn't look back. After that day, Emily closed every joint account. She changed passwords, moved her charity funds to a secure trust, and added me as her only co-signer. Susan and Mark tried to call, but she blocked them. Daniel, the quiet one, came a week later crying. He said, I tried to stop them, Grandma. They wouldn't listen. I believed him. He was weak, not wicked. As for Emily, she grew stronger. The scandal didn't break her foundation. In fact, when the story leaked, people rallied behind her. Donations doubled. The world saw what kind of woman she was. The kind her grandfather would have been proud of. One night, she came to me with tears in her eyes. Grandma, she said softly, I didn't want to hurt them, but I had to protect what you and Grandpa built. I held her hand and said, that's what family is supposed to do. Protect the good, even when it hurts. We sat there quietly, watching the sunset again. The same porch, the same warmth, but a different peace. And for the first time in years, I felt like Henry was there too, smiling somewhere above us. Because even though greed tried to destroy us again, love won. And this time, it wasn't me who saved the family name. It was her. If you felt this story, subscribe. The next chapter of Grandma's diary is coming soon. It had been months since peace finally returned. Emily was happy. I was proud. But then one morning, a letter showed up at our door. No name, no return address. Just our family name written in shaky handwriting. When Emily opened it, she gasped. And when I saw what was inside, my hands went cold. Because whoever sent that letter knew something they never should have known. You'd think after all that happened, life would calm down. No more lies, no more money fights. Just quiet mornings and tea on the porch. And for a while it was like that. Emily's foundation was growing, and my days finally felt peaceful. But peace is fragile. It only takes one secret, one letter, to bring everything crashing down again. It was a Tuesday morning. The mailman left a thick yellow envelope on our doorstep. Emily brought it inside, joking. Maybe someone sent you another fan letter, Grandma. We laughed, until she saw the handwriting. It wasn't typed. It was written in old ink, uneven, shaky, like someone nervous had written it. On the front it said only 2 words, the truth. Inside was a folded letter and a small photograph. The photo was of my husband, Henry, standing beside another woman. I felt my breath stop. Emily looked confused. Who's she? At first I didn't know, but when I turned the photo around, I saw a date written on the back, 1985. That was years before any of my children were born. Then I saw the note. It said, Henry promised us we'd be taken care of too, but he left us nothing. You owe us what's rightfully ours. Emily's eyes widened. Grandma, what does this mean? I wanted to tell her it was nonsense, that Henry was faithful. But inside I wasn't sure anymore. What if my husband, the man I'd loved all my life, had a secret family? And what if they were still alive, waiting to collect? For days I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes I saw that photo. Henry smiling beside that unknown woman. Emily tried to calm me. Grandma, maybe it's fake. People can Photoshop anything these days. But this wasn't digital. The paper smelled old. The ink was faded. The truth was buried somewhere in time. A week later, another envelope arrived. this time with documents. Birth certificates. One name stood out. Sarah Wilson, the supposed daughter of Henry Wilson. My blood went cold. Was this real? Or was someone playing a cruel game? Emily and I decided to visit Mr. Peterson, our family lawyer again. When he saw the letters, he frowned deeply. "These look authentic," he said quietly. "The handwriting, the paper. Whoever did this knew what they were doing." I asked him, "Could there really be another child?" He hesitated. "It's possible, Margaret, but I'd have to check the archives to be sure." Emily sat silently beside me. I could see she didn't want to believe it either. But that night, I overheard her on the phone. She was trying to find this Sarah Wilson herself. Days later, she found something. She came rushing into my room one afternoon, laptop in hand. "Grandma," she said breathlessly, "look." On the screen was an article from a small-town newspaper, a charity fundraiser. In the picture was a woman about 45, smiling warmly. Her name, Sarah Wilson. She looked familiar. Her eyes, they were Henry's eyes. I didn't say a word. I just stared at the photo until my heart started aching. If this woman was really Henry's daughter, then she was my stepdaughter, and that meant she had a claim to his inheritance. We drove to the town mentioned in the article, a quiet little place 2 hours away. When we found her office, Emily offered to go in first. She came out 10 minutes later, pale and shaking. "Grandma," she whispered. "She knows who we are." I walked in slowly. The woman looked up from her desk and froze. For a moment, it felt like looking into a mirror from decades ago. She smiled sadly. "You must be Margaret," she said softly. Her voice was calm, too calm. "I was wondering when you'd come." I asked her straight. "Who are you, really?" She handed me a letter, old, folded, worn by time. It was addressed to her, and signed by my husband, Henry. It said, "My dear Sarah, I wish I had been braver. Life is complicated and choices don't always come easy. But please know, even from afar, I have always cared for you. I've made arrangements to make sure you and your mother will never suffer." My hands trembled. I recognized the handwriting. It was his. But the letter had never been sent. Tears filled my eyes. "Why are you coming forward now?" I asked. She sighed. "Because after your husband passed, no one ever reached out. My mother's gone now. I just wanted to understand why." Emily stepped in. "So you don't want money?" Sarah shook her head. "No, I just wanted to meet the family he built." For a moment, I almost believed her. Until that night. That evening, Emily got another message. It was from an unknown number. It said, "You shouldn't have trusted her. Check the foundation accounts, now." We rushed to her computer, and what we saw nearly stopped my heart. Someone had tried to transfer a large sum from Henry's Heart Foundation to a new account, one under the name Sarah Wilson Trust. The transaction had been blocked, but the attempt was logged. We traced the IP address. It came from Sarah's office. Emily's hands shook. She lied to us. The next morning we confronted her. She didn't deny it. She said, "You think Henry only betrayed you?" "He betrayed us too. My mother raised me alone while he built a fortune. You got the name, the house, the legacy, and we got nothing." I said softly, "Revenge doesn't heal anything, dear. It only passes down the pain." But she didn't listen. Her voice cracked. "I just wanted what was mine." Emily stepped forward, calm but firm. "You tried to steal from a charity that helps people like your mother. That's not justice. That's greed." For a moment, Sarah looked at her, and then broke down crying. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I just wanted him to love me." And suddenly, she wasn't a villain anymore. She was just a broken child, grown into a bitter adult, carrying pain that never got answered. We didn't press charges. Instead, Emily made her an offer. "Work with us. Help us grow the foundation. Let that be his legacy. For both families." Sarah hesitated, but agreed. Over time, she became part of our lives. Slowly, carefully. Not family, not yet, but human again. Months later, the three of us stood at Henry's grave. I placed a flower down and whispered, "You left behind more than money, Henry. You left behind lessons." Emily took my hand. Sarah stood beside us. For the first time, I felt no anger, just peace, because sometimes forgiveness is the only inheritance worth keeping. If you want to know what happened when Sarah discovered Henry's final secret, don't miss the next story from Grandma's diary. We thought everything about Henry's past was finally laid to rest, until the day Sarah walked into my kitchen, pale as a ghost, holding an old leather briefcase. She said she found it hidden in the attic of her late mother's house. When she opened it, we realized Henry had been keeping a secret, one that could destroy everything we'd rebuilt. For months after meeting Sarah, life had started to feel calm again. Emily's foundation was thriving, and Sarah had become part of our team, humble, quiet, and helpful. I was starting to believe that maybe, after all the heartbreak, this family had finally learned what love meant. But I should have known better. Peace in my life never stayed long, because that briefcase, that one piece of leather covered in dust and memory, opened wounds I thought had healed. It was a Friday morning. The sun was gentle, and Emily was preparing for another charity event. I was in the garden trimming roses when I saw Sarah's car pull up fast. She got out clutching something tightly against her chest. That old brown briefcase. Her voice trembled. "I found it while cleaning Mom's attic," she said. "It was wrapped in an old blanket with Dad's name on it." For a moment, I couldn't move. Henry had always carried a briefcase, the same one he took to work every day. But when he died, I never found it. I assumed he'd lost it years before. We brought it inside and placed it on the dining table. It was old. The leather cracked. The metal latches rusted, but still locked. Sarah took a deep breath. "Do you want to open it together?" I nodded. My hands were shaking as she twisted the lock with an old key she'd found taped underneath it. When it finally clicked open, the smell of paper and time filled the air. Inside there were letters, hundreds of them, some addressed to me, some to Sarah's mother, and some with names neither of us recognized. Emily whispered, "What is all this?" We began sorting through them. Most of the letters were business-related. Receipts, contracts, old project notes from Henry's construction company. But then Sarah found one with no address. Just a single word written across it. Truth. She opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten confession. Henry's handwriting. Unmistakable and steady. My eyes moved across the words, each one cutting deeper. If you're reading this, it means I never found the courage to explain what happened. I made a mistake years ago, one that followed me for the rest of my life. But it wasn't what everyone would think. I didn't betray you, Margaret. I protected you. I stopped reading. My heart was pounding. Emily leaned closer. What does he mean? I kept going. The money that built our company wasn't entirely mine. I took a loan from a man who didn't believe in fair business. When I couldn't repay him on time, he threatened my family. So I did the only thing I could. I signed over part of the company under a false name. Her name was Claire, but she wasn't my lover. She was his wife. She helped me hide the money from her own husband to protect you. Years later, I promised to take care of her and her daughter, Sarah. My hands shook so hard the paper almost tore. "Claire was your mother?" I asked, turning to Sarah. She nodded slowly, tears filling her eyes. "He wasn't my father, was he?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and whispered, "No, my dear. But he was your protector." Sarah sat back, her face pale. "So all this time, my mother lied to me." Emily tried to comfort her, but Sarah pushed the letters away. "She said he abandoned us. She said he ruined her life." I reached across the table. Sometimes people lie not to hurt others, but to hide their shame. Maybe she was scared. We kept reading through the briefcase, uncovering more documents, old bank statements, signed contracts, photos of unfinished houses. And then, hidden at the very bottom, was a sealed envelope with my name on it. It was dated just a week before Henry died. My throat tightened as I opened it. My dearest Margaret, if you find this, know that everything I did, every secret I kept, was for you. The man I owed money to is still out there. His name is Robert Hale. If something ever happens to me, protect Emily. Protect our name. The truth may come looking for you one day. But don't be afraid. Love always, Henry. For a long time, no one said anything. Even the house felt still. Then Emily asked softly, "Do you think this Robert Hale is still alive?" Sarah frowned. "That name sounds familiar." She pulled out her phone and typed quickly. Then her eyes widened. "Grandma," she said quietly, "there's a businessman named Robert Hale Jr. He runs a major construction company now. And guess what? He's suing a charity for property fraud in another state." Emily looked at me. "Grandma, what if he comes for us next?" That night, I barely slept. Memories of Henry's business meetings, the nights he came home late and pale, all started making sense. He hadn't been hiding from me. He'd been protecting us from the Hale family. The next morning, Emily got an email from an anonymous sender. It said, "You have something that belongs to my family. Return it before I make it public." Attached was a scanned photo, one of the letters from Henry's briefcase. Someone knew we had it. Panic spread through the house. Sarah swore she hadn't told anyone. Emily checked her emails, security, everything. Nothing seemed hacked, until we realized the only people who knew about the briefcase were us and Mr. Peterson, our lawyer. I called him immediately, but he didn't answer. By evening, we got a call, not from him, but from his assistant. She said Mr. Peterson had been in an accident that morning. His car had gone off the road. He was alive, but unconscious. I felt my stomach drop. It couldn't be coincidence. Henry's warning was coming true. The next few days were a blur. Emily moved the briefcase to a bank vault. Sarah stayed with us for safety. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. One evening, as the sun went down, Emily came to sit beside me on the porch. She said, "Grandma, do you think this Robert Hale Jr. will find us?" I took her hand. "If he does, he'll find a family that stands together. Henry kept us safe once. Now it's our turn." Sarah joined us, holding a photo she'd found inside the briefcase earlier that day. It was of Henry, me, and a young Claire, smiling after finishing one of our first houses. On the back, Henry had written, "The people we protect define who we are." I looked at Sarah and said, "Then let's protect each other." The three of us sat there quietly, the orange glow of the sunset wrapping around us. Somewhere deep inside, I could almost feel Henry smiling. Not from guilt, but from relief, because even though his past had returned, his family, old and new, had finally chosen truth over greed. If you want to know what happens when Robert Hale finally shows up, don't miss the next story from Grandma's diary. He showed up at my door on a rainy evening, dressed in black, holding an envelope with my name on it. His voice was calm, but his eyes carried the same coldness I saw in my husband's nightmares. He said, "Mrs. Margaret, I believe you have something that belongs to the Hale family." That was the moment I realized the war Henry tried to protect us from had finally arrived at my doorstep. For weeks, after finding Henry's briefcase, we lived in quiet fear. Emails stopped, the phone calls ended, and the lawyer remained unconscious. But silence never means safety. It means someone is watching. And when Robert Hale Jr. finally came for us, he didn't come for the money. He came for revenge. It was just after 7 p.m. The rain was falling hard, and the lights flickered in the house. Emily was in the kitchen. Sarah was reviewing foundation papers when the doorbell rang. I opened it slowly, and there he was, tall, polished, confident, carrying the same cold arrogance his father once had. He smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Mrs. Margaret," he said softly, "I'm sorry to visit unannounced. I believe you knew my father?" Robert Hale, Sr.? My heart sank. I nodded carefully. Yes, many years ago. He stepped inside without waiting for permission. Then I suppose you already know why I'm here? Emily appeared behind me, tense. Sarah's face turned pale. Robert placed the envelope on the table. Your husband, Henry, made a deal with my father. A very unfortunate deal. One that cost my family millions. I've come to make things right. I crossed my arms. Henry repaid every debt he ever owed. Your father just didn't like losing control, Robert smirked. Control is a matter of perspective, Mrs. Margaret. The documents in that briefcase prove that part of your husband's business, and this house, legally belongs to us. Emily gasped. That's a lie. He leaned closer. Then prove me wrong. I sat down slowly, my fingers trembling. You think threats will bring your father's mistakes back? He shrugged. Mistakes? My father trusted Henry. And Henry hid money, falsified ownership, even helped his mistress escape with stolen assets. Sarah stepped forward. That's not true. My mother wasn't his mistress. Robert turned toward her with a mocking grin. Ah, you must be Claire's daughter. I've heard stories. Her voice cracked. You don't know anything about her. He smirked again. Maybe not, but I know about you. You work for the foundation, don't you? The one using my family's old properties for charity? Interesting choice. Emily's voice rose. You can't scare us. Robert tapped the envelope. Then open it. Inside were old photocopies, contracts with Henry's signature, one of them showing a clause I'd never seen before. It claimed that in the event of non-payment, ownership of certain assets, including land titles, would revert to Hale & Co. My mind spun. These were altered. Henry would never sign something like this. But before I could speak, Robert placed a flash drive on the table. Everything's backed up. Every transaction, every letter, every secret. He looked directly at me. I don't want your sympathy, Mrs. Margaret. I just want what's mine. I stared at him, holding my breath. And what if I say no? He smiled faintly. Then I'll do what my father couldn't. Destroy the Bennett name. The thunder outside roared like punctuation. The next morning we gathered in the study. Emily was pacing. Sarah was crying quietly. Grandma, Emily said, he's bluffing, right? Those documents can't be real. I wanted to believe that too, but deep inside, a part of me feared Henry's past had more shadows than I ever knew. We decided to call a new lawyer, Mrs. Lewis, an old friend of the family. When she arrived and reviewed the papers, her face grew pale. These are expertly forged, she said. But whoever did this had access to your husband's real signatures and business records. It'll be hard to prove otherwise. Can we fight it? I asked. She nodded. Yes, but it'll be ugly. If he files a lawsuit, the media will tear through your family history. Every secret will come out. Emily clenched her fists. Let them. I'm not letting some man take everything Grandpa built, Sarah, still shaken, whispered. Maybe we should just give him what he wants. I turned to her, hurt. After everything Henry did to protect us? To protect you? You think he'd want us to surrender? Tears rolled down her face. I just don't want anyone else to get hurt. Grandma. Silence filled the room until Mrs. Lewis said quietly, There may be one way. We all looked up. She continued. If there's any record, any hidden file that shows Henry's real intentions, we can prove this was extortion, not a deal. And then I remembered something. Henry's last note in the briefcase. If the truth comes looking for you, don't be afraid. That night I went into Henry's old study alone. The air smelled faintly of tobacco and old wood. I ran my hand along the bookshelf. And then it hit me. Henry used to say, the truth is always between 2 pages. I pulled out an old photo album, the one with our wedding pictures. And behind the last page, taped to the cardboard, was a small flash drive. I plugged it into my laptop. There it was. Dozens of scanned letters, contracts, voice recordings, all proving that Robert Hale Sr. had blackmailed Henry. and one audio file, dated 2 days before Henry's death. I clicked play. Henry's voice filled the room, weak but steady. "If you're hearing this, Margaret, I'm sorry I couldn't protect you longer. Robert's son is worse than him. He'll come after you. But remember, the documents you have are real proof of what they did. Don't give them fear. Give them truth." My hands shook as tears filled my eyes. Henry had left me a weapon, not of violence, but of truth. The next morning, Robert returned, this time with 2 lawyers. He said coldly, "I'll give you one last chance to cooperate." I didn't speak. I just handed him a USB. "Before you take what's mine," I said, "listen to what your father did." He frowned but plugged it into his laptop. The room went silent as Henry's voice played. "Robert Hale, Sr., if you're hearing this, you've already destroyed enough lives. Leave my family alone, or I'll make sure everyone knows what you've done." The recording ended with Henry naming several bribery accounts. All under Hale & Co. Robert's face went white. His lawyers whispered frantically. He snapped, "Where did you get this?" I looked him straight in the eye. "From the man your father could never silence." He slammed his laptop shut and stormed out, his pride collapsing faster than his threats. Days passed. The lawsuit never came. Robert disappeared from the news. His company, under investigation for fraud. Henry's name was cleared, and for the first time in years, I slept without fear. Sarah stayed with us, helping Emily expand the foundation. One afternoon as we sat on the porch, Emily asked, "Do you think Grandpa knew how much we'd go through for this?" I smiled softly. "He didn't just leave us money, Emily. He left us courage." Sarah looked out at the sunset and said quietly, "He also left us each other." We sat in silence, watching the last rays fade, the briefcase now locked away, not as a symbol of secrets, but of survival. And in that moment I realized something Henry had always known. The real inheritance wasn't $10 million. It was the strength to protect the ones you love, even when the world turns against you. If you think this story ended here, wait till you hear what Grandma finds next in Henry's will. I thought everything was over. The threats, the lies, the court cases, all gone. But a month after Robert Hale disappeared, I got a call from the lawyer's office. They said, "Mrs. Margaret, there's another letter from your husband. It was sealed inside his will, marked, 'Open only after justice is served.'" When I opened it, I learned the truth Henry had hidden from everyone, including me. For weeks, life had finally become calm again. The house was quiet, the foundation was running smoothly, and Emily and Sarah were closer than ever. We laughed again. We cooked together. I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd finally reached peace. But peace can be cruel, because just when you start believing it's real, it reminds you there's one last chapter you've yet to read. It was a sunny morning when the letter arrived. An official envelope stamped with the lawyer's seal. I almost didn't want to open it, but something inside me, that same ache that used to wake me at 3 a.m., told me I needed to know. I called Emily and Sarah. When they arrived, we sat together at the dining table, the same one where we'd found Henry's briefcase weeks ago. Emily looked nervous. "Do you think it's bad news?" I smiled faintly. "Your grandfather never sent bad news, only lessons." Sarah nodded softly. "Then let's open it." I unsealed the envelope carefully. Inside were 2 letters, one addressed to me, and another sealed envelope with the name Sarah written on it. My heart started to race. I unfolded the letter addressed to me and began to read. "My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, it means the truth about the Hale family has finally come to light. I'm proud of you. I knew you'd protect what mattered most. But there's one more truth you need to know before you move on. I left something behind, not just for you, but for someone I wronged. Someone who deserved better." I stopped, my eyes wet. Emily whispered, "Who's he talking about?" I kept reading. You remember Claire, Sarah's mother? What I never told you is that years ago, when the business was collapsing, I asked her to sign over property under her name to hide it from the Hales. I promised I'd fix it later, but I never did. That land now belongs to her daughter. It's in a trust under the name Sarah Bennett Hale. You must give her the documents when the time is right. She is not just Claire's daughter, Margaret. She's mine. The letter slipped from my hands. For a moment, the room went silent. The world stopped moving. Emily's voice cracked. What did he just say? I whispered, barely breathing. He said Sarah is his daughter. Sarah's eyes widened, her face pale. That can't be true. My mother never told me that. I handed her the second envelope. Only one way to find out, dear. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a small photo. A picture of Henry holding a baby in his arms, smiling down with tears in his eyes. On the back it said, "My secret joy. My reason for never giving up." Sarah covered her mouth, sobbing. Emily sat frozen, staring at the photo. "Grandma," she whispered, "does that mean Sarah is my sister?" I nodded slowly, tears streaming down my face. "Yes, my love. She's family." For hours, none of us spoke. The air in the room felt heavy, full of memories, questions, and broken pieces of love, finally. Sarah whispered. All this time, I hated him. I thought he ruined my mother's life, but he was just trying to protect me. I reached out and held her hand. Sometimes love hides behind silence, Sarah. He didn't want to burden you with his mistakes. Emily looked down, tears filling her eyes. All these years I thought I was an only child. And now, Sarah wiped her tears and smiled weakly. Now you have a sister. They both hugged, awkward at first, but then tightly, like something long lost had finally been found. In that moment, I saw Henry's face in both of them, his stubbornness in Emily's eyes, his gentleness in Sarah's smile. For the first time, everything made sense. Later that night, I sat alone on the porch, reading Henry's letter again. At the bottom, he had written one last line. Family isn't who shares your name. It's who shares your truth. Those words stayed with me. The next week, we visited the lawyer again. He confirmed everything. The land deed, the trust fund, the DNA verification Henry had secretly filed before his death. Sarah Bennett Hale, legally and biologically, was Henry's daughter. When we left the office, Sarah stopped at the door and looked up at me. "Grandma," she said softly, "does this change anything between us?" I smiled through my tears. "It doesn't change who you are to me, dear. It only explains why I always felt like you were part of this family. But peace never comes without a final test." A few days later, a man showed up at the Foundation's office, a representative from the government. He said the property Henry had hidden under Claire's name had been under dispute for years and was now being re-evaluated. Apparently, the Hales had filed a last-minute claim before their company went under. Emily panicked. What if they take it away again? I took a deep breath. Then we fight, like Henry taught us to. But this time, the truth was on our side. We submitted every document, Henry's letter, the audio files, the proof of fraud. Weeks later, the verdict came in. The court dismissed the Hales' claim entirely. The property officially belonged to Sarah Bennett Hale. When Sarah heard the news, she cried. Not from relief, but from love. She said, "He never got to see me as his daughter. But he still gave me everything he could." I held her close. "He gave you more than that, Sarah. He gave you a family. Months passed. The house became warm again, filled with laughter, stories, and quiet evenings by the fire. Emily and Sarah ran the foundation together, naming a new branch after Henry, the Bennett Hope Project. One evening, as the sun set, we sat together on the porch. The wind carried the smell of jasmine, Henry's favorite. Emily turned to me. "Grandma, do you ever think Grandpa knew this would all happen?" I smiled softly. He didn't plan every moment, but he planted enough love to survive every storm. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Do you think he's proud of us? I looked at the sky, painted in orange and gold. He always was. As the light faded, I felt that familiar calm, the kind that comes when all the pieces finally fall into place. The inheritance wasn't about money or land. It was about truth, forgiveness, and the kind of love that survives even death. Before going inside, I whispered into the breeze. Rest now, Henry. We're all home. If you've followed this story till the end, don't miss the next chapter of Grandma's diary, where every secret finds its light. We thought we'd buried every secret with Henry, until the day Sarah walked into the house holding a dusty notebook she'd found behind a loose wall in the old workshop. When I opened it, I froze, because the handwriting was Henry's, and the final entry was dated 3 years after his funeral. It had been months since we closed the chapter of the inheritance. Life had turned peaceful, too peaceful. Emily and Sarah ran the foundation. I spent my days in the garden. But peace has a strange way of whispering just before the storm returns. And this time, it whispered from the pages of a forgotten journal. Sarah had gone to clean the old storage shed where Henry used to fix things. Behind a broken shelf, she'd noticed a loose board. When she pried it open, a leather-bound book slid out, wrapped in an oil-stained cloth. She thought it was one of my gardening notes, until she saw the initials on the cover, H.B. When she brought it to me, I felt my heart skip. Henry always kept journals, one for business, one for his thoughts. But I had burned the last one after the funeral, unable to read his pain. This one shouldn't exist. We sat at the kitchen table, both shaking as I untied the cord. The smell of engine oil and paper filled the air. The first entry read, June 5th, 1998. If anyone finds this, it means I failed to keep my promise again. But I'm not gone yet, I whispered. That's impossible. He died in 1995. The early pages were ordinary. Drawings of house plans, notes about tools, even sketches of roses from our garden. Then the tone shifted. They think I'm dead. Maybe that's safer for them. Hale's men are still watching. My hands trembled. Sarah, this means he faked his death? She shook her head, confused. But the hospital, the funeral, everything was real. We read on. I left the will early. If Margaret ever finds this, tell her I didn't run away. I hid, for her. I could barely breathe. Henry had always seemed troubled in his last months. Paranoid, afraid of something unseen. Now the puzzle pieces were sliding into place. Further down the page was an address scribbled beside a note. Safe House, Riverbend Town. Emily joined us halfway through, stunned as I read aloud. Grandma, Riverbend is only 2 hours from here. Another line sent chills through me. If I don't return by winter, give the journal to the one who carries my eyes. She'll know what to do. I looked at Emily, then at Sarah. Both of them had his eyes. We couldn't ignore it. The next morning we drove to Riverbend, a small town wrapped in fog and silence. The address led us to an abandoned mechanic's shop near the riverbank. The sign was faded. H.B. Repairs. My knees went weak. Henry had once dreamed of opening a repair shop after retirement. Had he really built it? After his death? Inside, dust coated every surface. Old tools hung neatly, untouched for years. But on the workbench sat a tin box sealed with tape. On top of it was a note. My name written in Henry's unmistakable handwriting. Sarah whispered, Grandma, maybe we shouldn't. But I'd waited too long for answers. I peeled the tape slowly and opened the box. Inside were photographs of houses, people, newspaper clippings. Each one had a date written on the back. The latest was from 1997, 2 years after he died, showing a young woman and her child standing beside a half-built home. On the back he'd written, They finally have a roof. Promise kept. Tears blurred my vision. Henry, what were you doing? At the bottom of the box lay one final envelope. It said, "To Margaret, if love still remembers me." We drove home in silence. That night I sat alone by the fireplace and opened the envelope. "My dearest Margaret, I know by now you've faced the truth I couldn't tell. The Hales weren't the only danger. I made enemies when I testified against men who laundered money through my company. They wanted me gone, so I let them think they'd succeeded. I stayed hidden until the threat faded. But my heart never left home. When you read this, know that every day away from you was the hardest thing I ever did." At the bottom of the letter was something else. A small key taped beside a post-it that said, "Final draw, study desk." My hands shook as I opened Henry's old desk. Inside the final drawer was a sealed wooden box. The key fit perfectly. Inside lay a pocket watch, still ticking, and a tiny cassette tape. I played it on an old recorder. Henry's voice filled the room. Older, softer, but alive. "If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it back. But don't be sad, Margaret. I finished what I started. I built homes for the families we failed to help. I left enough funds hidden in the Foundation's accounts to keep them running for years. Don't look for me. Just keep the work alive. That's where I'll live on." The tape clicked off. For a long time I sat there crying. Not from grief, but from relief. Henry hadn't died a broken man. He'd died a good one. The next morning I gathered Emily and Sarah. We listened to the tape together. When it ended, Emily wiped her tears. "Grandpa never left us. He just kept building." Sarah smiled faintly. "Then we'll keep building too." We decided to honor him quietly by expanding the foundation into Riverbend, naming it Henry's Haven. Every home we build now carries a small plaque engraved with his words, "Love builds what fear destroys." Sometimes at dusk, when the light hits the garden just right, I swear I can hear the sound of his hammer, gentle, rhythmic, steady. Maybe it's just the wind, or maybe some promises are too strong to die. If you think Henry's story ends here, wait until you hear what Grandma discovers inside her own old diary next. When I opened my old diary last week, I expected memories. Not secrets, but there it was. A folded letter glued inside one of the pages I'd written nearly 40 years ago. And it wasn't my handwriting. It was Henry's. Ever since we found Henry's journal, I'd been thinking about my past. About all the moments I thought were ordinary, but weren't. The letter he left behind answered so many questions, but it also opened new ones. What else had he hidden? What else had I missed while living under the same roof as a man full of secrets and love? That's what led me to open the dusty box under my bed, the one that held my old diaries from my younger days. I hadn't touched those diaries in decades. Each one was full of messy ink, pressed flowers, and stories of my life. When I met Henry, when Emily was born, when the business nearly went bankrupt. But when I opened the diary from 1979, I noticed something strange. A few pages near the middle were glued together, unevenly. At first, I thought it was water damage. But when I pulled gently, a folded paper slipped out. The handwriting stopped my breath. It was Henry's, sharp, clean, unmistakable. But the date on top said May 2nd, 1978. That was the year Emily was born. The year everything started to change. I unfolded it carefully, my hands trembling. It read, "If you ever find this, Maggie, it means I couldn't tell you the truth back then. You deserve to know who really saved Emily that night." My stomach turned. Saved her? From what? My memory flashed back to that stormy night. Emily had been only 3 months old, feverish, barely breathing. The doctor said she might not make it through the night. Henry had vanished for hours, saying he'd gone to get medicine from a friend. He came back soaked and shaking, with a vial that saved her life. We never talked about it again. Now, in this letter, Henry had written, "It wasn't a friend who gave me that vial. It was a man named Arthur Hale, the same man who would later try to destroy us. I owed him a debt I couldn't repay, and that debt followed me for decades. Arthur Hale. The name from Henry's final letter in Part 7. The man who, watched him. He wasn't just an enemy. He had once been a savior. He gave me the vial but demanded a favor in return. I didn't know what he meant. Until years later when he came back, asking me to hide something for him. I had no choice. My hands shook harder. What had Henry hidden? And where? I couldn't sleep that night. The letter replayed in my mind like an echo that wouldn't fade. At sunrise, I called Emily and Sarah to the kitchen. "Your grandfather didn't just fake his death," I said softly. "He might have hidden something for a man named Arthur Hale." Emily frowned. "The name Hale keeps showing up. Who was he?" "He worked with Henry's company in the 80s, I said. "I thought he was long gone." Sarah scrolled through her phone and froze. "Grandma, look at this." She showed me a photo of an article from last year. "Arthur Hale's estate found empty after mysterious auction. Missing files linked to old corporate scandal." My blood ran cold. It couldn't be a coincidence. We searched Henry's belongings again. His workshop, his desk, even the attic. Nothing. Then Emily said, "What about the diary itself? Maybe that wasn't the only hidden page." So we started checking every diary I'd ever written. 30 years of ink and paper. And then, in my 1983 journal, behind a photo of Henry holding baby Sarah, we found another envelope. Inside it, a small brass key, the same shape as the one that opened Henry's wooden box in Part 7. Attached was a tag with 3 words, "Under the clock tower." The clock tower stood in the center of town, abandoned for years. Henry and I had once gone there on our first anniversary. It was where he'd promised we'd grow old together under the ticking of time. Now, decades later, I was standing there again, holding that same key. Emily and Sarah came with me. The door was locked, but the key fit perfectly. Inside, the air smelled like dust and iron. We climbed the spiral stairs until we reached the bell chamber. There, hidden behind one of the old gears, was a metal box, sealed and rusted. On the lid, carved faintly, were Henry's initials and the year 1984. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was a folder marked Project Hale. It was full of documents, bank records, property deeds, and letters showing that Arthur Hale had laundered money through Henry's company. Henry had kept the proof hidden to protect us. But at the very bottom was one more letter, written in Henry's hand. "Maggie, if you ever find this, give it to the authorities. But know this, the truth doesn't always bring peace. I didn't hide this for me. I hid it so Emily and Sarah could live without fear. The debt is over now. Tell them their grandfather wasn't a coward. He was a protector." I sat there, tears falling on the paper. All these years I'd blamed Henry for the distance between us, but he had been fighting to keep us safe. We turned the folder over to the police. They confirmed the documents exposed a decades-old financial crime. Long forgotten, but still enough to clear Henry's name completely. A week later, the mayor invited me to a memorial at the clock tower. They wanted to rename it the Bennett Tower, in Henry's honor. When they unveiled the plaque, it read, "For the man who kept time safe for those he loved." I smiled through tears. I could almost hear the ticking of his pocket watch again. Steady, strong, eternal. That night back home, I placed Henry's tape recorder beside my diary, and for the first time in years, I wrote new words. "Dear Henry, the truth didn't destroy us. It set us free. If you thought this was the end, you're wrong. Because next time, I'll tell you who really came knocking at my door a week later, claiming to be Henry's lost son. The day I thought my past was finally buried, someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, a man stood there holding an old photograph of Henry and said, 'I think he was my father.' But when I looked into his eyes, I realized this wasn't about family. It was about finishing something Henry never told us. After the town renamed the clock tower Bennett Tower, Life finally felt peaceful again. I spent my mornings tending roses, my afternoons helping Emily and Sarah at Henry's Haven. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest had lifted. Then came that knock. It was a cloudy Tuesday, the kind of day where the world feels half asleep. When I opened the door, a stranger stood there, mid-30s, polite, nervous. He introduced himself softly. "My name's Daniel Hale." Hale, that name. My heart stopped. He handed me a photograph. Henry, young, smiling, with his arm around a woman I'd never seen. Daniel pointed to the woman and said, "That's my mother. She passed away 2 months ago. She told me before she died that my father's name was Henry Bennett." I could barely breathe. "My Henry?" I asked him to come in. Emily and Sarah were out, thank God. I needed time to think. As Daniel sat at the kitchen table, he spoke calmly, like someone used to being doubted. He said he'd been searching for Henry for years, ever since he found letters his mother kept hidden. According to him, Henry had met her while traveling for business in 1984. But 1984 was the same year Henry disappeared for weeks during the Hale scandal. Could it be true? Still, something about Daniel felt rehearsed. His words were too perfect. His sadness seemed performed. I listened quietly, nodding, my mind racing. Henry had been many things. Stubborn, secretive, protective. But unfaithful? I refused to believe it. Daniel noticed my silence. "I'm not here for money," he said. "I just want to know my family." He slid an envelope across the table. Inside were 2 things. A faded letter signed HB, and a small gold ring engraved with the initials, MB, my initials. I felt cold all over. The letter said, "If you ever read this, Daniel, know that I kept you safe by staying away. Tell your mother I'm sorry. Tell Margaret I'll explain someday." It looked like Henry's handwriting. Almost exactly, but almost wasn't enough, because Henry never called me Margaret in letters, only Maggie. I folded the letter and met Daniel's eyes. "Where did you get this?" He hesitated. "From a box my mother kept. She said a man named Arthur Hale gave it to her before he disappeared." That name again, Arthur Hale, the man who blackmailed Henry. And now, his supposed son had shown up at my door. That night I couldn't sleep. Henry's words from his last tape echoed in my head. The truth doesn't always bring peace. The next morning, Emily and Sarah came home. When I told them about Daniel, Sarah was furious. "Grandma, this is another scam. They just want the foundation's money." Emily was calmer. "Maybe not," she said. "If Henry was protecting someone back then, maybe this man's telling the truth." We agreed to meet Daniel again, this time with a lawyer present. At the meeting, Daniel brought more proof. A DNA test from a private clinic showing he shared markers with Henry's recorded profile. But the document looked off. No official seal, no signature. When our lawyer asked for lab details, Daniel got defensive. He said, "I'm not here to be interrogated. I came here because I thought family mattered to him." And he walked out. Something about his reaction didn't sit right. If he truly was Henry's son, he would have wanted to know the truth, not escape it. That night I searched every old box again, looking for something, anything, that could explain this. And that's when I found it. Inside Henry's toolbox, taped under the lid, a small cassette labeled, "For Maggie. Only if someone says he's my son." My hands trembled as I put the tape in the recorder. Henry's voice filled the room again. Older, slower, tired. "Maggie, if you're hearing this, someone's come for what isn't his. His name might be Daniel Hale or something else. Don't believe the story. Arthur Hale had a son, and he swore that if I ruined him, he'd send that boy after everything we built. I never met the child, but he was trained to find what's left of me. If he's come to you, it means Hale's game isn't over. There's a file in the clock tower, the drawer beneath the gearbox. Use it before they use you." I stopped the tape, heart pounding. Henry had predicted this. Daniel wasn't Henry's son. He was Arthur Hale's. The next morning, I drove to Bennett Tower alone. The building was locked, but I still had the key from before. Inside, the air smelled of rust and old rain. I climbed to the gear room, found the drawer Henry mentioned, and pulled it open. Inside was a thick file marked Project Hale, Phase Tahadu. It contained contracts, forged signatures, and letters, all proving Arthur Hale had planned to steal Henry's estate using false heirs and shell companies. And there it was, a recent photo of Daniel with a note beneath it. Trained for deception. Use if family resists. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. Henry had tried to warn me even from beyond the grave. Just then footsteps echoed below. I froze. A man's voice called out, "Mrs. Bennett? Are you here?" It was Daniel. I stepped out, clutching the file. "Why are you following me?" I demanded. He looked startled, then calm. "I just want to talk." But his eyes flicked toward the folder in my hands. He lunged for it. I screamed, clutching it to my chest. The two of us struggled near the stairwell until I hit the emergency alarm. The bell rang out across town. Within minutes, police arrived. Sarah had tracked my phone and come running. Daniel tried to escape, but the officers cornered him. They found fake IDs in his bag, all under different names. The truth came out. Daniel was indeed Arthur Hale's son. His mother had told him Henry destroyed their family, and Hale had trained him for revenge. At the police station, Daniel finally broke down. He confessed everything. Arthur Hale told me Henry stole millions from him. He said if I found Henry's widow, there'd be money hidden. He made me believe Henry killed my father. I looked at him. A grown man poisoned by lies his whole life. He wasn't evil, just lost. I whispered, "Henry didn't kill your father, Daniel. He saved us all from him." Tears filled his eyes. I didn't know. I thought I was fixing something. I handed the police the entire Project Hale file. It proved Henry had been framed all those years ago. Every scandal, every accusation, all part of Hale's plan to destroy him. And now it was finally over. Weeks passed. Daniel was released after cooperating with the investigation. Before leaving town, he came to see me one last time. He stood on my porch, hat in hand, ashamed. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly. "But I wanted to say thank you for not hating me like I was taught to hate you." I looked at him and saw not an enemy, but a boy who'd grown up in the shadow of another man's mistakes. "Daniel," I said softly, "the best thing you can do now is stop living by your father's lies. Go build something real. That's how you honor the truth." He nodded, eyes wet, and walked away into the dusk. Later that night, I took Henry's tape recorder to the garden. I pressed play one last time, just to hear his voice again. "If love remembers me, then I've done enough," I whispered back. "It remembers, Henry. Always." The stars were bright, and the clock tower bells rang in the distance, steady, pure, alive. It felt like the world was finally exhaling. Months later at Henry's Haven, we added a new wing, the Hale Rehabilitation Center, built to help families hurt by lies and greed rebuild their lives. On opening day, a donation arrived anonymously. It was a single gold ring, engraved with "Forgive." Emily looked at me. "Was that Daniel?" I smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe it was Henry's way of saying the circle's complete." The wind rustled the trees. The clock tower chimed 3 times, just like the night I found Henry's first letter. This time, instead of pain, it brought peace. Life doesn't always give answers. Sometimes it just gives closure. And that's enough. If you felt what I felt, don't stop here. The next story I tell will remind you that love never really dies. It just changes shape.